Okay, the next test that we're going to talk about is for nitrate, and it runs very similar to the phosphate test. So please, if you're going to do nitrate test, please also watch the video for the phosphate. You want to see both of these videos because there are some minor differences that you want to really be aware of. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the quality control steps when you're using the spectrophotometers to measure nutrients. So the quality control step is, as you know, is that step we use to make sure this meter is working properly before we use it to take a measurement of an unknown water sample. So the quality control step with both the phosphorus and the nitrogen test is to run the procedures on a standard. And so this is purchased from the company, and we know exactly how much nitrate is in this standard. And of course we also have a standard for phosphate. And the correct amount that is actually in here is 1.0 milligrams per liter for both the phosphate and the nitrate, 1.0 milligrams per liter. So what we have to do is treat this standard as if it were an unknown and run the entire procedure with this machine to see if we get 1.0, if the machine correctly reads 1.0 for this. If it does, then we know the machine is working. Then we go on to step 2, which is to measure our unknown sample. Our criteria here at Randolph-Macon call for the machine to be within 10% of the true value. So since both the nitrate and the phosphate standards are 1.0 milligrams per liter, that means to be sure these machines are working properly, you have to get a reading. When you run the test with this solution, you have to get a reading between 0.9 and 1.1 milligrams per liter. In other words, you can be high or low by 10%. So to review this, you have a sample of river water that is an unknown. You don't know what's in here for nitrogen and phosphorus. You want to measure it. Before you even start working with this, you set it aside and you work with the standard. You run these procedures from step 1 all the way to the end using the standard. If you get a number that is between 0.9 and 1.1 for the standard, you now know this machine is working. You record those QC steps on the data sheet, and when you are complete with all those QC steps, you can set all this stuff aside, and then you repeat these exact same procedures, except now you're doing it with your sample, with your unknown river water. And we will believe the number that this machine gives us for this sample because we just confirmed that it gives us the right answers for this standard. You're going to need 2 cuvettes, as always, a graduated cylinder, the powder pillows. For this particular test, you're also going to need clean corks. So they are clean just as if they were glassware. You're obviously going to need your sample. And for this particular test, you're also going to need deionized water. So you have to read the instructions carefully, but as always, you turn on the machine, you punch in a number that tells it which test you want to run. You dial in a wavelength using this dial, and you always approach that wavelength from lower numbers. So for example, for this nitrate test, the wavelength has to be set to 400. You would start at a number below 400 and spin the dial until you got up to 400 and then stopped. For this particular test, it asks you to fill one of your cuvettes with sample water and one of your cuvettes with deionized water, and then both of them are going to get a powder pillow. So for this test, you actually need 2 of these powder pillows. And in the phosphorus test, I show you how to open these correctly and how to pour them into the cuvettes correctly, so please look at the phosphorus test before you work with these. But the point is, these will both be filled with liquid. As always, you do all your measurements of liquid with the graduated cylinder. Do not depend on the small mark on the side that says 25 milliliters. That's not reliable. Use the graduated cylinder, pour in the correct amount, add your 2 powder pillows, and at this point the instructions are going to tell you to stopper these and to shake them. And it turns out there is actually a reliable technique for that. So of course I never touch anything with my hands. So I have just added the powder pillows in. The instructions are going to tell you to start a 1-minute timer. So I have the powder pillows have been added, the liquid's been added, I've started my 1-minute timer, and this is the correct shaking motion. You don't want to agitate them fast. You don't want to let them sit. You just want to basically turn them back and forth like this. Now, all of you should realize I'm making a grave mistake here. I am touching these with my bare hands. So, in point of fact, the way this process would look would be like this. Then, simply follow the rest of the instructions. At some point you're going to have to take the corks off. So you can do that. And then one of these is your blank, and that's going to go in first. And then the next one is your sample, and that's going to go in second. So, and then when you are finished with that, you're going to have 2 vials that have chemical in it. And as with all the tests where you use any of these powder pillows, the leftover water from the test needs to go into the waste jar. And then these need to be cleaned really carefully and thoroughly with test tube brushes, because those chemicals will coat the glass on the inside and ruin these. And these are about $60 a piece, so it will ruin these before you put them. So before you put them away, make sure that they are well washed. I just want to show you a little bit about handling these cuvettes correctly for both the phosphorus and the nitrogen test. You're going to be adding sample water to these. You're going to be adding powder pillows to these. I've already talked about how to swirl and shake correctly. I want to talk about the final step where you're going to put them into the machine. So as always, you never touch these with your hands. So I have my sample in here. This one, as you can see, is empty, but during the test you'll actually have some sample in here. Before it goes into the machine, this needs to be well cleaned. So I'm picking up by the top with a Kim wipe, and I'm really going to scrub it. And you can do this during the waiting periods. For both tests, there are waiting periods where you have a timer going, 2 to 5 minutes depending on the test. And so you can use that time to really clean these well. They need to be absolutely clear, free of defects, because you're going to beam light through these as part of the measurement. When it is time, and you need to follow the instructions for the exact steps, but when it is time to put one of these into the machine, a reminder that all of these cuvettes have text on just one side of them. And once they are cleaned and you're ready to put them into the machine, you take that text and you point it out to the left side of the machine. You would close it, push the appropriate buttons to do what you need to do, open it up, and remove it. That's it.